Good morning, my friends. This is Paul, and today I'll be reviewing for you Persona 3 Reload for the Switch 2. This is now the fourth version of Persona 3 overall, the second on a Nintendo system because the Switch 1 got Persona 3 Portable. Normally when I review a remake or a remaster, I like to go through the changes made, but again, because this is now the third remake of Persona 3, I am mainly going to be focused on the changes to Reload in particular, so that I don't give myself a headache trying to cross-reference with the other versions. Now, I've never played any version of Persona 3 until now, so when I looked up the changes made, I found quite the exhaustive list, so I'm going to try to keep it to the major changes so that I don't overwhelm myself and I don't overwhelm you guys. First and foremost, one thing that's just something that this game's motto was in general was try to make the game so that it's up to modern standards and primarily on par with Persona 5 and Persona 5 Royal. The graphics have been completely overhauled so that they're closer to the standards of Persona 5. It's still not a very pretty game apart from a handful of exceptions. I do feel like this probably could have run on the Switch 1, but Atlas was like, we gotta take advantage of the shiny new system and give players another excuse to use game keycards. I will admit that the original version of Persona 3, from what I saw, looked pretty darn ugly, and its two remakes that came before did not do much to address that, and this is the first full graphical overhaul, which I am very grateful for. Other things have been completely retooled as well. The voice acting is now completely re-recorded from scratch. None of the original actors reprise their role except for Tara Platt as Elizabeth. And the new cast sounds great. I would imagine the reason why they recast everyone is because the original Persona 3 came out in 2007 for the PlayStation 2, so a lot of time has passed, and they probably wanted newer voice actors to have fresh, young voices because they were playing a bunch of teenagers. Thankfully, if you're nostalgic for the original actors, most of them are still in the game. They're just playing different roles, which I think is kind of cool. It's a really neat compromise to make sure that no one feels left out. A lot of the music has been either re-recorded or remastered, although in some instances you can still listen to the original music, as there are now options to change the music that plays when you're exploring Tartarus, and some of those available tunes are tunes from Persona 3 and Persona 3 Fez. For some reason, Persona 3 Portable is left out of there. And if you have the right DLC, you can even listen to songs from other Persona games. Like you can get costumes and music from Persona 5 and Persona 4, which I think is nice because it allows for the games to have a sense of connectivity. The story, while from what I've heard it's largely the same as its original version, it's been expanded in many areas where there are new story sequences. Some story sequences have been reworked, and there are a lot more optional scenarios where you can spend time with certain characters that maybe didn't get too much time. For instance, one of the changes that I saw were that there were more hangouts that you could do in the dorm with your other SEAS members. And these conversations would give you even more upgrades and personas that weren't available in the original game. And I always love it when remakes add completely new story scenarios and rework areas of the original story that were problematic. So that's a very welcome change there. The battle system has also seen quite a lot of tweaks, again to make it more in line with what Persona 5 did. The baton pass is now implemented. It's now called shifting, and you can switch to another party member if you hit one weakness, and then that party member can hit another. There are now light and dark attacks, just like in Persona 5, so as a result, a lot of characters, enemies, and bosses have new skills and abilities that take advantage of this. And the personas have also been redesigned so that they are up to snuff with modern standards. There are more personas, including a few from Persona 5. Characters now have special moves called theurgy, and these theurgy attacks usually have this very bombastic CGI cutscene that is really fun to watch, and it usually does either a lot of damage or has a really cool perk like healing everyone or doing double damage. The UI has been completely overhauled so that I feel like a broken record here, but it's fitting with the standards of Persona 5. That game was notorious for being very asymmetrical and very stylish with its UI, with a lot of times the words in the menu being at awkward angles or the letters being different sizes, and this game is no different, and I love it. I wish more games would be willing to experiment with font in the same way that Persona 5 and now Persona 3 Reload did. With regards to Tartarus, characters no longer get fatigued, so you can have longer runs throughout the dungeon. When you're doing shuffle time, you can actually see what the cards do when you select them, which is a carryover from Persona 4 Golden. There are now new collectibles called Twilight Fragments, and you can get them in two ways. You can get them from Elizabeth when you do enough side quests, and you can also find them inside these breakable objects, which themselves are new. There are these weird looking objects that have lights at the top of them, and when you slash them with your sword, you have a random chance of getting items. The blue ones always contain Twilight Fragments, and the orange ones have a chance of dropping other things. It's completely random, sometimes you don't get anything, but it is really fun to slash them. Now what these Twilight Fragments do is that you can find these clocks that refill everyone's health and stamina, and you need 7 Twilight Fragments to activate them. There is another use for Twilight Fragments though, and that there are these new types of chests that appear within Tartarus that require varying numbers of Twilight Fragments to open them. And this is a really cool system because you have to think, do I want to conserve enough Twilight Fragments to use at the clocks, or do I want to get these super rare items from the chests? And I think it really all depends on your playstyle. If you're the type that just wants to go through Tartarus in one run, then you probably would want to do the clocks so that people would be able to refill their health and stamina. But if you want more of the rare items, then you can just splurge on them whenever you see the chests. There are also more random things that can happen within Tartarus to spice up the gameplay. Like there are areas where Tartarus gets really dark, or there are these new things called monad doors, I forget how you pronounce them, that can... Honestly, I didn't spend too much attention with these doors, but from what I can tell, there's new challenging bosses, and they can reveal what the next floor is. Those are all of the major changes that I can think of. Again, there are so many more. I found this humongous list, but again, I'll say it one more time. Overall, the game is just more like Persona 5 and doesn't feel as dated. So now that we've finished talking about the changes, this is actually my first time playing Persona 3 in any form. So now I'm going to talk about this from a newcomer's perspective and see if you should be willing to try it. I've been a huge fan of Persona for a very long time. I loved both versions of Tokyo Mirage Sessions. I loved pretty much every spin-off of Persona 5 that was on a Nintendo system, and this game felt like it was a natural follow-up. Like when I got into the combat, I was like, oh, I pretty much already know what I'm doing here because it's pretty much the same system as in the previous games. Guarding, shifting to another opponent, trying to hit the enemy's weakness, it's all there. But just in case you've never played a Persona game, I'll try my best to walk through the basics without overwhelming you with tutorials. Basically what Persona 3 is, and most Persona games in general, is that it's a life management sim that also has elements of dungeon exploration and turn-based combat. So you have a calendar system, and you have to figure out how you're going to effectively manage each day. You can possibly hang out with your friends, you can buy supplies, you can do stuff that'll raise your social stats, which there's only 3 social stats in this game. In Persona 5 you had 5 to worry about. So that makes managing your free time quite a bit easier. And what I love about these systems is that they all tend to work together to serve each other. Like when you're dungeon crawling, you can get money that you can sell in your free time to get more weapons that can help make the battles easier and so on. but I'm getting ahead of myself. You can hang out with people, and then as you rank up your hangout, you can get bonuses when you fuse personas. Now, the way that personas work are they're these kind of spirits that dwell with your character in battle that are like a physical representation of that character's characteristics. And these are basically how you attack the enemies. Now, all of your party members can only have one persona each, but your main character can have multiple personas, and the amount of personas you can carry increases as the game progresses. Now, the way that you get other personas is that after you win a battle, there's a sequence called Shuffle Time, where you can choose a reward. And some of these awards can be things like having more experience, getting more gold, and most importantly, getting another persona. And these personas each have different abilities, and they also change up your strengths and weaknesses in battle. And if you want to get even more than that, then you go to a place called the Velvet Room, where you can sacrifice 2, sometimes 3 personas, and then get like a fusion. And once you fuse this new persona, you can choose some of the skills from the previous 2 personas to carry over to this. And each persona is connected to a different arcana. We'll get into why I'm okay with arcana cards being into this game later. And each friend that you hang out with is tied to that particular category. So if for example, you're hanging out with someone who's of the Empress arcana, and then you have a persona that's based on the Empress, then you get more bonus skills that otherwise you'd have to level up for. At first, this is a bit of a confusing system, but once you get into it, it really boils down to which personas are you willing to sacrifice to carry over some of their skills to make a more powerful persona. And the higher the level you are, the more powerful personas you can make. That's about as simple of an explanation as I can get. But again, I'm jumping all over the place, so let's get into dungeon exploration. The way it works in this game is that unlike the themed palaces of Persona 5, where they each have a distinct fixed layout and a central core theme that defines everything about it, the dungeon in this game is procedurally generated, and it's called Tartarus. In the evenings, assuming certain conditions are met, you can choose to explore Tartarus, and each floor has a different layout, and while you're exploring, you gradually fill out the map as you go, and there will be these enemies called shadows that you can attack, so thankfully the battles aren't random. If you attack the shadows first, then you can make the first move in the battle, but if the shadows attack you, then they will make the first move. And how the battle system works is that each shadow will have their own strengths and weaknesses. So for example, one shadow might be weak to a lightning attack. And if you hit the shadow with their weakness, then your character will get another turn and can possibly strike down another enemy, or using the returning baton pass, again now called shifting from Persona 5, you can strike even more weaknesses by switching to another character that has that ability. Now, if you knock down all of the enemies at the same time, you have the option to do an all-out attack, where the characters just run in and swarm the enemies and do an ultra-powerful attack. But keep in mind that the enemies have the same abilities as you are, so if they hit your character's weakness, then they get another turn and can swap off to another enemy as well. Overall, I love the combat system in the Persona games. I love being able to exploit the weaknesses, and if you do it well enough, you can even make sure that the enemies don't even get a turn. You can just absolutely annihilate them if you know what their weaknesses are. And it made the game feel less like a grindy chore, because I was like, oh cool, the enemies keep progressively getting tougher, and now I can learn new weaknesses. And sometimes there's a bit of logical deduction that can be done to make it slightly easier to figure it out. For example, you might see an enemy that's on fire, and logically, if you attack fire with fire, that doesn't really do anything. So you might think, okay, what can I do to put out the fire? And that might give you a hint that the enemy's weakness is ice. Now, this doesn't work for all of the shadows. Sometimes it really does boil down to trial and error. But at the same time, the trial and error is so much fun that I never really got bothered by that too much. Now you might be thinking, why can't I just go through all of Tartarus in one run? The way that it works is that every couple of floors, and again it varies depending on which floors you're on, there will be what's called a border floor, where the game just will not let you pass until, quote, certain conditions have been met. These conditions feel very arbitrary. It just feels like the game decides, like, okay, this particular calendar day, you're going to be able to explore more of Tartarus. And it's really up to you how much you want to progress. Like, you might want to take a break for the day and then come back another day. You might want to spend a lot of time doing all the social events like shopping and hanging out with your friends, and then wait until the last minute to do Tartarus. Most of the time, the game will tell you how many days you have left until an unavoidable story sequence, and so you'll have to micromanage your time and make sure that you have enough experience from Tartarus. Thankfully, even if you do hit a border floor, that doesn't mean you are prevented from entering Tartarus. Heck, you can enter it almost every day of the calendar year as long as the characters are up to it. So you could just keep going to Tartarus and go to lower floors and keep grinding if you want. And I love this system, even if I slightly miss the more tightly designed dungeons of Persona 5, as they have more of a puzzle aspect. They usually have a really cool theme that has a lot of cool interpretations, like, you know, one that's based on a museum. And Tartarus, while it does try to change what the visuals look like as you progress through the game so that it doesn't get boring, at the end of the day, it's still a randomly generated dungeon. And I don't know, I just don't find that as cool. But at the same time, I loved exploring Tartarus because you hardly ever went more than a minute without an enemy to fight. And so it kept things entertaining, and I would always look forward to the next time I could go to Tartarus so that I'd be able to fight more shadows. Besides the fact that the graphics looked like they could easily have worked on Switch 1, I was otherwise very impressed with the production values of this game. I thought the new voice actors did a phenomenal job. Again, I don't have really much to compare, but I saw a little bit of a sample of one character's voice on Behind the Voice Actors, and it looked like maybe they didn't have the best recording equipment, and that's one of the reasons why they re-recorded everything. I feel like they did just the right amount of inflection, as well as the corniness that you would expect from an anime-based game like this. I thought the story was pretty good. Like, I don't think I like it as much as Persona 5, and I also feel like that game handles characters a little bit better, as you get to gradually see these characters realize that they are Persona users, and you get to see them develop in more of a natural way, whereas in Persona 3, the characters tend to have their development after they awaken to a persona, and with the exception of your main character, you don't really get to see the moment that they become a Persona user. So it feels like the game just says, oh, by the way, this person's capable, let's just add this person to your party. And it kind of feels a bit anticlimactic. Like, it's cool to keep gathering more party members, but it doesn't feel earned. It doesn't feel like there was a journey to get to that point. The story also is very spread out. Like, sometimes you'll go several hours before the next story sequence will happen. And sometimes that story sequence is just, oh, hey, the characters decided they wanted to go out to dinner and they're just going to talk about things. So yes, there are some cool moments, and I do think the payoff at the end is, yes, it's cheesy anime nonsense, but I still love it. The game puts a lot of emphasis on friendship, and I just absolutely love the sense of camaraderie and community that I kept feeling throughout this game. It felt like it also had a lot of Persona trademarks to it. Now, I get that this was a bit of a paradigm shift in the Persona universe, that Persona 3 was where the games got closer to the modern standard. And so maybe a lot of these cliches, like the fact that there's usually a lot of scenes that involve the characters over talking about food, or there's a scene in a hot spring where there's a misunderstanding with the guys and the girls, you know, the usual nonsense that you hear. But there's just enough serious moments that break it up, that I feel like it's a nice juxtaposition. And sometimes it can feel fun to have more things going on than just school all the time. Like, it's cool when the characters go on vacation and you get to see a different side of them. One thing that I do find a bit clunky about Reload is that, just like in every other Persona game before it, for some bizarre reason, you can't use the control stick for anything other than moving your character. You have to use the control pad to select everything. When you're just using the Joy-Cons, this isn't so bad, because the Joy-Con control sticks are terrible, so I'm thankful for an opportunity not to use them, but it can feel really awkward on a Pro controller when the control pad is so small. I also think it's really bizarre that there's no autosave. Now, granted, there are way more opportunities for you to be able to save than there were in the original game, but I just find it bizarre that they couldn't have at least given the option for autosaves. Now, thankfully, the game never crashed on me, and there was only one battle that I lost, but thankfully, the game gives you the option to either retry the battle or lower the difficulty level, so you don't have to feel like you're blindsided like you were in Tokyo Mirage Sessions, where in my most recent playthrough, I thought it might be fun to go to a higher difficulty level, but I got a game over, and I lost all of that progress because I had forgotten to save all that time. And thankfully, Persona 3 never gave me that grievance. So I am thankful that the game seems like it was well optimized, and no crashes, no performance issues that I saw. Apparently, other people have noticed frame drops in this game, and for me personally, I actually went out of my way to try to see if I knew what people were talking about, and I couldn't really spot too much. I mean, I think maybe once or twice there was a little bit of a stutter, but it only happened for like a second, and then it was over with. Nothing was ever jarring, nothing was ever distracting. The animations were really nice, and the character portraits were really well drawn. They had a lot more expression to them. One thing I was a bit miffed on is that there are two different types of cutscenes. There are some that are done in the anime style, and others that are in full 3D. The full 3D ones were phenomenal. The anime ones, I couldn't stand. But at least the anime cutscenes were shorter, so I didn't have to put up with them too much. From a Catholic perspective, this game could be potentially problematic, because it is rated M. There's quite a lot of questionable content, and even if you're able to stomach a lot of the blood splattering and a lot of the sexual stuff and the violence and the profanity and all the other stuff that the game has, you might be thinking, okay, Paul, I can handle all that, but why is a Catholic playing a game that uses tarot cards? And my response to that is that they're basically the same thing as having boons during a roguelike. And if they were called by anything else, I don't think anyone would care. So because they are functionally not acting like actual tarot cards, I felt like the utility was just like, say, getting a goddess boon in Hades, and no one complained about that. There are instances where you can visit a fortune teller, or you can learn about magic in the school, and in those instances I fast-forwarded the dialogue and never entertained going to the fortune teller. So when the game actually does have stuff that is functionally like being in the occult, that's where I drew the line and skipped. Thankfully, the game lets you skip the dialogue whenever you want, so if there is a sequence that is just really uncomfortable for you, you do have the option to fast forward. You're not locked to, oh, I can only fast forward stuff I've seen before, like in some of the early Ace Attorney games. So if you can only handle some of the game, you do have that option. I will say though, I don't think this game is even close to how disturbing Persona 5 could get. I do feel like this is one of the tamer Persona games. It still absolutely deserves its M rating, but the procedurally generated dungeons don't feel quite as overwhelming in its theming as Persona 5 did. So I think you're probably going to be more okay with this game because the M-rated stuff is a bit on the tamer side. And as far as positive Catholic elements about this game, I just really love how the game puts so much emphasis on the bonds of friendship. And there's also a lot of talk about enjoying life and realizing the joys that life can give you. So even if there's questionable stuff, there's also a lot of good moments that can really get you thinking about what does it mean to live life and why should I have friendship in my life. Sometimes it's really cheesy, but I personally just love that theme of everyone getting along that I was willing to put up with it. Now, Persona 3 Reload is $60, and this Switch 2 version didn't come with any of the DLC that the previous versions had. So you will have to buy all of the Persona 5 costume packs and the music and the episode Aegis DLC that provides 30 more hours of content. Personally, I'm still holding off on the Answer DLC because I'm a bit burnt out. This game did feel like it dragged quite a lot, and I probably could have cut quite a lot of this game's content out because I was like, okay, I feel like the game could have wrapped up like 5 hours ago. But you are getting a very long game for $60. It took me almost 100 hours to beat it, and I feel like that's the kind of price that you should be doing. And hey, they could have charged $70 like Nintendo's standard, but they chose to go the previous generation's pricing standard. And I appreciate the restraint, even if I feel like they only did that so that they could justify charging for the DLC. Now, I bought the Persona 5 music and costume pack, and I thought that that was really cool to dress up my party members like the Phantom Thieves and to be able to hear Persona 5 music in my battles. And it was, it was pretty cheap. I think I only paid $8 for it overall, and I feel like I got my money's worth. Now, I did rent this from Gamefly, and I feel like that was the way to go because I can't see too many people wanting to replay this because it's so darn long. But keep in mind that this is a game keycard, so even if you get the physical version, you will have to download the full thing from the internet. As someone who primarily rents games, I am perfectly cool with that because you can rent game keycards, but you can't rent download codes in a box. So if we have to suffer with game keycards, renting makes it a good compromise. So I recommend this game a lot if you really like Persona, if you really like life management / dungeon crawling / RPG hybrids. If you're already a big fan of Persona 5, you'll probably really like this as well. Just keep in mind this is the older game, so maybe certain things are less refined, but at least Reload makes enough changes to the presentation, the voice acting, and the gameplay that it should be a smooth gameplay experience. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Let me know if you have any questions, and until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!